A big meeting tonight on family separations at the border. President Trump and Republicans try to reach a deal to end the policy. Plus, the first poll in the race for governor shows one candidate with a big lead and many voters still undecided.
And all of a sudden you have these empty storefronts, which kind of sends a message of there's nothing here for you.
It's a story of the haves and the have-nots. While some San Diego malls are struggling, others are reinventing themselves.
It wasn't until Juneteenth, 1865, that the Union Army got to Texas and liberated the slaves.
Plus, how the history of Juneteenth is being remembered in San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. President Trump is meeting with Republicans in Congress tonight. Lawmakers from his own party are now calling for an end to the forced family separation policy at the border. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says votes could begin later this week. The Senate plan would keep families together while they're detained. No other details have been announced. President Trump has said he wants funding for a border wall to be part of any package that ends the separation policy. He spoke about the practice earlier today.
And they violate the law. People that come in violate the law. They endanger their children in the process. And frankly, they endanger all of our children. You see what happens with MS-13, where your sons and daughters are attacked violently? I don't want judges. I want border security. I don't want to try people. I don't want people coming in. Do you know, if a person comes in and puts 1 foot on our ground, it's essentially welcome to America, welcome to our country. You never get them out.
Today in Florida, 2 Democratic lawmakers were kept from entering a facility where children are being held. Several governors have said they will recall National Guard members working at the border due to the child separation policy. The Department of Homeland Security now says more than 2,300 children were separated from May 5th to June 9th. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer put out a statement this afternoon that criticizes the child separation policy. Part of it reads, families shouldn't be used as bargaining chips in the fight over how to repair our broken immigration system. The right thing to do for the administration to rescind the policy now and for Congress to bring forward broader immigration legislation. PBS NewsHour is following the developments from Washington, and we'll have more on this story coming up at 7 here on KPBS. Democrat Gavin Newsom enters the general election with a large lead over Republican John Cox in the California governor's race. That's according to the first public poll conducted since California's primary earlier this month. The survey comes from USC and the LA Times. It shows Newsom ahead of Cox 45% to 28%. More than a quarter of voters are undecided. Sea level rise over the next 2 decades could put more than 20,000 California homes at risk. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
A new study of rising sea levels finds that more than $15 billion worth of private property is at risk in California over the next 25 years. That's bad for property owners and the communities that rely on high-value coastal properties for a major part of their tax base. Now, the Union of Concerned Scientists combined property tax records and ocean prediction data to examine the impact nationally. And report author Christina Dahl says findings about California were a bit surprising.
The area exposed may not be that great, but we have a lot of people living along the coast, and we're relatively densely populated. So you don't have to expose a whole lot of the community's area in order to expose a lot of homes.
Nearly 1,000 San Diego County properties are at risk if worst-case scenarios are realized by 2045. Coastal property could end up underwater or be susceptible to more frequent flooding. Dahl suggests that communities begin looking at coping strategies to minimize the impact of rising ocean levels. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The United States has warmed by an average of 1.6 degrees over the past 30 years. It might not sound like much, but it can lead to a big change in the Earth's climate. AP reporter Peter Banda shows us how it's impacting places like Colorado.
Salida, Colorado, a picturesque town in the heart of the Rocky Mountains.
When I was a kid, it was really nice weather here, really nice.
Paul Linza has lived in Salida all his life, but the 86-year-old has seen his hometown change. The winters have become drier, and he has to water his lawn more often.
Well, it changed quite a bit because we didn't get no moisture and everything. It just changed all of a sudden.
Buell Maddox used to install only a few air conditioners a year when he started out several years ago. Now,
I probably won't get to all the air conditioning jobs. I mean, and we typically do have a list. I mean, it's probably already at 10 or 15 people this year.
They may not seem like big changes, but they have widespread implications. According to NOAA, the temperature in the U.S. has gone up nearly 1.6 degrees in the last 30 years. The warming planet is just part of the dire predictions made by a NASA scientist in 1988. That's when James Hansen testified before Congress that global warming was already here and worsening. He warned that the greenhouse effect had been detected and was affecting the climate. An AP analysis shows some cities have seen an even greater increase than the Salida area's 1.9 degrees warming since 1988. The yearly average temperature in Atlantic City rose 2.9 degrees, and Des Moines, Iowa warmed by 3.3 degrees.
The science was right, and yet we haven't taken advantage of our scientific understanding to make policies that are effective.
The impact of climate change has been sweeping, from melting Arctic ice to rising sea level. There's more extreme weather, flood-inducing downpours, extended droughts, heat waves, and bitter cold. Hansen left NASA in 2013 and is now an advocate for policies to control fossil fuel emissions.
We can't afford to go through another cycle like that, where young people assume that the political leaders are going to address the problem.
Mike Sagaski has battled the effects of climate change. The veteran firefighter who lives in Salida remembers a time when a 10,000-acre fire was considered huge.
Boom, all of a sudden we're starting to get larger fires. And now we're up over 100,000 easy. You kind of keep saying, how can they get much worse? But they do.
The hotter world a scientist predicted 30 years ago, now an everyday reality. Peter Banda, Associated Press, Salida, Colorado.
Hopefully you had a great day today. The weather was pretty nice for everyone here across San Diego County. Let's take a glimpse here at the radar. Nothing is going on. It is awfully dry, and that's really the case for all of California and also the Southwest. It is really heating up and also staying nice and dry. For tonight, 64 degrees for the temperature with those clouds increasing. Of course, they'll be there when you wake up, and then by the afternoon, we'll have more sunshine again. Of course, that's all along the coast here. Chula Vista at 62 tonight, Oceanside dipping down to 60, Borrego Springs 73, and Mount Laguna in the 50s for their lows. Now tomorrow we have a high pressure system moving into place right over Southern California. That's going to create some very hot and dry conditions, especially for the deserts. It's going to be above average. Meanwhile, along the coast to the north of us, really, we do have this cooler breeze coming on in, so things are going to be feeling very comfortable along the coast while those interior areas are cooking. So here we are in Oceanside, 78 degrees with sunshine tomorrow. San Diego nice and bright at 77, and Chula Vista at 79 degrees. But look at those interior regions. Yikes, 92 in Ramona. Borrego Springs at 109, and even Mount Laguna reaching 82 degrees. It's going to stay hot pretty much all week. This is the late week outlook, and it is still awfully dry and hot all across the Southwest. So on Wednesday, we'll be at 78 degrees, and then by the weekend, it's looking good. A bit cooler on Sunday. Look at that. We go from 78 on Saturday and then 76 on Sunday. In the interior areas, Wednesday, 84. A bit warmer by Friday, and then a nice cool down by Sunday in the low 80s. And on Wednesday, it will be 82 degrees and sunny. Very nice conditions. And by Sunday, we dip down to the 70s in the mountains. And in the deserts, well, it is just hot. It's going to stay in the triple digits every single day. The hottest day of the week That's going to be Friday, dangerously hot at 112 degrees. Make sure you're staying hydrated out there and also limit your outdoor activities. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
President Donald Trump is threatening China with another round of tariffs, this time up to $200 billion of goods imported to the U.S. The escalation has had an impact on stocks today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell nearly 300 points. All gains for the year have been wiped out in recent weeks. Stocks that do a lot of business in China, like San Diego-based Qualcomm, dropped about 1%. Department stores have been struggling to keep up with the changing habits of American shoppers. And as they close stores, the malls that once housed them are affected too. In tonight's New Economy Report, KPBS producer Nico Wills looks at 2 San Diego shopping centers to see what's working and what's not.
Deserted corridors, empty stairways, and shuttered storefronts. This isn't an abandoned property in the middle of nowhere. This is downtown San Diego and what's left of Horton Plaza. The mall and the surrounding area have had a reversal of fortunes in recent years. When Horton Plaza was sparkly and new in 1985, the gas lamp district was considered sketchy.
The 80s, a couple years after it opened.
Roger Scholey covered San Diego growth and development for the Union-Tribune for decades. He says that perception factored into the mall's design.
The way it was designed in 85 was it was sort of a fortress, mainly because the property around it, the blocks around that, were not all that safe at the time. It was designed that way as limited access. Now that's a disadvantage to Horton Plaza.
Since 1985, San Diego's gas lamp district has been revitalized, blossoming into a tourist destination instead of a place to be avoided, while Horton Plaza has become a shell of what it once was. Westfield is the company that owns and operates Horton, and if it's a neglectful parent to its downtown property, it dotes on UTC. Westfield's sister venture in La Jolla is on the tail end of a complete makeover. Along with new stores, restaurants, and even a speakeasy, upgrades include landscape plazas, gardens, and art installations. Reflecting pools and comfy chairs invite visitors to linger. You can call it a mall if you want, but Westfield calls it an outdoor retail resort. A recent survey by Pew Research Center finds that 80% of Americans shop online. This isn't great news for malls.
It keeps me on the forefront of kind of marketing and business issues.
Miro Kopik is a marketing professor at San Diego State University. He says that while Amazon and other online shopping sites have made a trip to the mall unnecessary for many shoppers, he thinks the changes at UTC represent an evolution of what a mall can be, which could win back some customers.
Between having the ArcLight cinemas there, the 24-hour fitness gym, and then all these restaurants, I think it makes it a real destination that people will go there not only to shop, but really to spend the day, the afternoon at the mall.
The evolution of UTC took some imagination and lots of money. Westfield says renovations are expected to cost $600 million. Horton Plaza was supposed to get a makeover too, or that's the allegation anyway, in a lawsuit filed by Jimbo's Naturally. Jimbo's is an organic grocery store tucked into the west side of the mall off First Avenue. It's been there nearly 5 years. The inside of Jimbo's is clean and bright, a stark contrast to the dingy area right outside, which on the day I visited reeked of urine.
When we opened the doors in October of 2013, really downtown and Horton Plaza specifically was hustling and bustling. I mean, we were kind of the main thoroughfare getting from one side of the shopping mall to the other. There was a lot of activities, there was plenty of stores open, there was a lot of restaurants, so there was definitely attractions to come to what was once an iconic mall in San Diego. So over time, we've started to see shops closing, leases not being renewed, and all of a sudden you have these empty storefronts, which kind of sends a message of there's nothing here for you. So we have seen it affect our business tremendously.
That's Kelly Hartford. She's the marketing director for Jimbo's.
I love it.
She says Jimbo's is suing because they say Horton Plaza didn't uphold their agreement, which was to keep up a first-class business operation. The complaint filed last month states Westfield indicated to Jimbo's that it was looking to attract other high-end retailers like Jimbo's and would spend up to $400 million to renovate Horton Plaza. That didn't happen.
And then they left.
Roger Scholey says the exodus of tenants from Horton Plaza probably wasn't a completely organic process.
Some of them went willingly because their business wasn't very good. Other ones probably went because they were kicked out. And you'd say, why would you kick out a perfectly good tenant now? And the answer is because if they were selling the property, ironically, it's a better deal for the buyer, because the buyer doesn't have to, or the Westfield doesn't have to buy out the lease to bring somebody else in.
Westfield isn't talking, but the San Diego Union-Tribune reports a sale of Horton Plaza is pending, and that the location may be used for office space and amenities for high-tech tenants. Scholey points out there's lots of unoccupied storefronts in downtown.
I think people who live downtown must be a little frustrated about they can't buy the simplest thing in downtown. They have to go to Mission Valley to do it.
That sounds like this could be an opportunity for investors willing to take a chance on retail spaces serving San Diego's downtown residents. Nico Will, KPBS News.
A new city report details the challenges in San Diego's housing market. The housing inventory report shows 30% of moderate income households cannot afford rent. 70% cannot afford to own a home. The report shows rent increased 34% from 2013 to 2017. Studios were up 51%, and only 13% of new units were for low-income residents. A voter initiative that would allow California cities and counties to expand rent control laws has qualified for the November ballot. Capitol Public Radio's Chris Nichols has more.
The ballot measure would repeal a 1995 state law called Costa-Hawkins that limits how far local governments can go with rent control. For example, the current law prevents cities and counties from applying rent control to apartments built after 1995. And from applying rent caps to condos or single-family homes. Supporters of the measure say stronger laws are needed as rising rents force more Californians out of their homes, but opponents say rent control has the unintended consequence of slowing down new construction, which can actually lead to higher rents as rental housing becomes more scarce. In Sacramento, I'm Chris Nichols.
Across the country, homes are sitting empty and neglected, all remnants of the nation's foreclosure crisis. Marketplace reporter Marielle Segra tells us why these so-called zombie homes haven't received a new life.
A lot of us can still feel the effects of the financial crisis, even 10 years later. But there are places in the country where you can still see them. Places where houses got stuck in a sort of foreclosure limbo. People call them zombie homes. Here's how this happens. If you buy a house and at some point stop paying your mortgage, the bank can foreclose on you, take your house and sell it. But that's a complicated process, and it got even more complicated during the housing crisis. Foreclosures started mounting into the millions. Also, a lot of foreclosures stalled because banks had been sloppy with their paperwork, and it wasn't clear which mortgages belonged to them. Some cases dragged on for so many years, the banks just walked away. That left thousands of homes in ownership limbo. Meanwhile, the people living in a lot of these homes left. Bill Manton and Carol Gordon live in Massapequa, New York, a town plagued with zombie homes.
People walked away without any consequences as far as mortgages or taxes. They just got them and they left.
Right. They just left it. They just walked out and left it.
The house.
And so we got zombie homes, stuck in foreclosure and abandoned. There were 50,000 of them by 2013, clustered in states where there are lots of protections for homeowners, so foreclosures take the longest, like New York, New Jersey, and Florida. So they just sit there. Weeds grow. Sometimes squatters move in.
The other thing is they don't maintain the houses. There's no incentive. They're only interested in having a roof over their head.
Right.
They're not interested. They have no legal ownership to any of it.
Nationwide, the number of zombie homes has actually dropped 70% over the past few years. But in some places, there's still a big problem.
People can't afford to even get a home, affordable housing.
So it's like there's this shortage of housing here on Long Island, but meanwhile you have all these empty
houses. Right, that's right.
It's easy to forget the housing crisis happened. Home values are soaring again, rents are rising. But in places like Massapequa, these zombie homes are constant reminders that the crisis isn't over yet.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, on the ground at the U.S.-Mexico border as President Trump doubles down on his policy of separating immigrant families. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
One of San Diego's biggest events is just a few weeks away. And this year, people who attend Comic-Con will see fewer cars outside the convention center. The city will close Harbor Drive to traffic between Park Boulevard and First Avenue. That covers the entire length of the convention center. Shuttle buses will still be allowed access. The traffic closures will begin with Comic-Con preview night on July 18th. There's a new addition to the U.S. Navy's presence in San Diego. The USS Manchester arrived today. It was built in Alabama, but San Diego will be its home port. The USS Manchester is among the Navy's smaller combat ships and will be used in training missions to detect mines at sea. California might create some new barriers to selling alcohol and marijuana in the same business. Lawmakers are considering a bill that would prevent a business owner from having a license to sell both at the same location. Alcoholic drinks infused with cannabis would also be banned.
They're not yet to the point of the research where they can say always invariably you have this much marijuana in your system. The leveraging effect is X, so they don't put a number on it. But marijuana in the system does affect and amplify alcohol's effects on the human physiology.
The bill would also ban the sale of marijuana at bars. San Diegans will soon have another place to legally purchase marijuana. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the City Council approved a new dispensary on Monday.
The dispensary in Sorrento Valley was not approved without a fight. The project, which will occupy a former credit union branch, faced multiple delays. It also attracted opposition from both anti-marijuana activists and rivals in the cannabis industry, who profit from limited competition. But entrepreneur Belinda Smith says cannabis consumers deserve choices.
The more players that we have that are going to be compliant with the industry laws, the state laws, and the more choices we offer consumers, I think the healthier it is overall.
Monday's approval brings the number of permits for cannabis dispensaries in San Diego to 19, though some of those have not yet opened up shop. Smith says after some improvements to her building's interior, she hopes to start business in September. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Today is an American holiday often overlooked, but Juneteenth, or African American Independence Day, is as significant to our history as the 4th of July. KPBS reporter Jade Heinman steps into the African American Museum to take us through this part of history.
San Diego's only African museum sits right on Columbia Street in Old Town.
Yes, it used to be a house and now it's a museum.
Professor Chuck Ambers is the curator and executive director.
I finance this out of my own pocket.
And nestled in these walls is 6,000 years of African world history. In this room, we find a slice of African American history known as Juneteenth.
This involves an absolute equality of rights and the rights of property.
The words from Order Number 3 were read from a balcony in Galveston, Texas, somewhere between the 13th and 19th of June, 1865. That's when Union troops finally made it across the country to Texas, took over, and announced the total emancipation of the 250,000 slaves being held there. The news was met with celebration of freedom and the grief of struggle for years to come.
The slaves in the South, particularly in Texas, did not celebrate and really know about the Emancipation Proclamation, January the 1st, 1863. It wasn't until Juneteenth, 1865, that the Union Army got to Texas and liberated the slaves.
Professor Amber says the traditional celebration of Juneteenth included a party with a special menu of red velvet cake, red soda, grilled meat, and vegetables. The initial celebration was right in Galveston, Texas, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation.
So that's why the Texans, African Americans in Texas, just celebrated, and they wanted that to be the African American Independence Day.
And speaking of which, it's for years been looked at as the African American Independence Day. But really, shouldn't it be regarded as America's Independence Day, since that's the day that everybody was free?
Technically, yeah, I would imagine so. But you have a situation, I don't know if I want to get into politics today, that's saying Black Lives Matter. And some people say all lives should matter, and they really should. But we're still having, 130 years later, we're still having a conflict with this one person, one vote. All men and women are created equal. We're still having a problem with that.
Amber says more than a century has gone by, and America is still working to live up to the creed of all people are created equal. Juneteenth is as much a celebration as it is a check of progress and renewed commitment to keep momentum moving forward. Jade Hindman, KPBS News.
Now, here's a look at what we are working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, moving closer to a trade war, how tariffs could hurt the economy. And on Midday Edition, healing the wounds of war with music. Meet the songwriter behind Rifles and Rosary Beads. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.